Good afternoon and welcome to the Weather Studio Live. I'm Alex Deakin and I'm broadcasting to you from the Met Office Weather Studio. And earlier on today, about 4.5 hours ago to be precise, upstairs in the operations centre of the Met Office, the decision was taken to name the first storm of our season. Storm Ali is on the way, and for the next 15 minutes or so we are talking about that storm, where it is now, where it's going, and what the impacts are likely to be across the United Kingdom. Now, this storm is, at the moment, a couple of thousand miles away, but it is approaching and approaching fast. We are talking Wednesday, severe weather across northern Britain. As I said, we'll go into the full details in a moment. I have a guest, a chief meteorologist from the Operations Centre, joining me momentarily. But first of all, do get in touch. Send us your questions. Do you have questions about this storm that's approaching? Do get in touch with us. We're live on YouTube. We're also live on Periscope. If you're watching on YouTube, give us the thumbs up as well. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. You won't miss a thing. Okay, let's get on with the main aspect of today's Weather Studio Live, and that is Storm Ali. I'm going to introduce our guest. Come on, Will. This is Will Lang. Thank you very much for joining us, sparing time on this busy day. Firstly, just explain to everyone what your role is here at the Met Office, what you do.
Yeah, I'm one of the chief meteorologists. So we're a team of 8 forecasters, and it's our job to look after the weather forecasts for the whole of the UK on behalf of the Met Office 24/7.
You get to make the big calls.
We make the big calls, so we get to issue the warnings, and interestingly, we also get to name the storms now as well.
Right, first and foremost, let's get on. Where is Storm Ali at the moment? This is the satellite image. Here's the UK here, but we're focusing in over here, aren't we, out in the Atlantic?
That's right. So what we've got currently, there's some interesting weather last night, which is moving away. This arc of cloud is Storm Helene. Originally a hurricane, of course, and that's moving away. But what we're now looking at is this big swathe of cloud across the Atlantic. Whoa. And this kind of hook shape on the northern side of it, which is quite an interesting shape of cloud. And that's the kind of thing that is indicative of a storm developing.
So a couple of thousand miles away from the UK, we've been watching this. This is this morning's satellite imagery. And basically under this is where we're seeing developments. This is basically Storm Ali forming.
That's right. So it's not quite developed into the proper storm yet, but this is a developing area of low pressure. And what you can see here, this jet stream cloud here separates the cold air in the Arctic from the warm air in the tropics. And that's the jet stream. And low pressure systems drift onto the jet stream and start to develop, start to tighten up and develop really strong winds and get pushed towards the UK as they do so.
I think we can see that happening now. So this is now the projection, the forecast. There's Storm Ali way out to sea this evening, Tuesday. But again, let's zoom in a little bit and focus in on the storm. And you can see as we run through time, basically over the next, less than 24 hours now, isn't it? It's going to be approaching the UK. And what's happening here? So it doesn't look that scary at this stage.
No, but what's happening is that it's drifting into a part of the jet stream where it really starts to develop quite quickly as it reaches towards the UK overnight. You can see the isobars are developing. The isobars are getting tighter and tighter together, particularly on the southern side of the low, and that's where we get the strongest winds.
And that's key, isn't it? It's those isobars, the tighter they are, and you can see now, so this is tomorrow lunchtime, Wednesday, you can see how tight those isobars are across particularly northern Britain. Now let's run through that sequence again, because you mentioned something really interesting there, the jet stream. Now, just describe, what is the jet stream first and foremost, and why is it impacting?
Okay, well, it's the zone of strong winds in the upper atmosphere that develops where the cold air in the north meets the warm air to the south. And that means you can get strong winds at about 30,000 feet, that it could be about 200 miles an hour or so. Now, the interesting thing for a low pressure system is that if it drifts across into the jet stream, it gets caught up and pushed very quickly towards the UK. And the other thing is that when it drifts to the northern side, that's the colder side of the jet stream, that can make it really deepen. So it gets, the isobars get tighter and tighter, the pressure drops in the middle of it, and you can see that's what's happening here. This is a very developmental situation, just as it starts to reach the UK overnight.
So this is, just to reiterate, these are the jet streams, the purple winds high up in the atmosphere where the aeroplanes fly, but those winds high up in the atmosphere are really impacting what's going on at the surface and intensifying this area of low pressure. Now, these winds are not the winds that we're going to see across on the floor, are they? These are not the surface winds. These are high up in the atmosphere, but we can show you the winds at the surface. And again, let's run through that same sequence again and just show how Ali approaches and intensifies as we go through the next 24 hours.
So here we've just got the strongest winds, not just all of the winds. So there's a bit of strong wind to go around northern Scotland overnight. We shouldn't take our eye off this. But what happens here, as the isobars tighten and as Ali develops and it drifts into the cold side of the jet, then we get stronger and stronger winds, and you can see there's more wind developing here, particularly as we run through the overnight period and into tomorrow morning. That's when it gets really windy across parts of the UK.
So again, just to clarify on the timings, this is Wednesday morning, and that's as it's approaching. Now this is going to be rush hour. This is going to be rush hour as Ali approaches. So the first of the effects will be across Northern Ireland first thing in the morning, but then the storm itself. Now interestingly, the amber warning doesn't cover northern Scotland, which is where Ali is actually going. It's on the southern flank where the strongest winds are likely to be.
Well, that's a good point, because if you notice in the centre of the low, the isobars aren't particularly tight. So that's almost like the eye of the storm. It's not like a hurricane, really, but that's where winds aren't particularly light. There might be some heavy rain there, but the strongest winds are to the south of that zone, to the south of the low pressure centre. And it looks like, as you said, Northern Ireland, parts of central Scotland in particular.
So that's the development. That's the next 18 hours or so. Let's have a look at the impacts. What are we likely to see? As I said, we do have warnings in force. We have an amber warning in force for parts of Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland. First things first, Northern Ireland, because that's where the impacts will be felt first through the morning rush hour, or possibly even before the morning rush hour. What are we looking at in terms of gusts, and what does that mean?
Okay, well, generally, within that amber warning area, so that includes Northern Ireland, we're looking at gusts reaching 65 to 70 miles an hour, 75 miles an hour. Now, in terms of impacts, that can cause a lot of damage in terms of power lines, fallen trees, etc. Can cause transport disruption and also damage to buildings as well. So people do really need to take care.
So flying debris is a potential incident. And this storm is particularly dangerous this time of year, isn't it? Because it's September rather than February, because the trees are in leaf. Why?
And that's one of the things we take into account. Trees are a lot heavier at this time of year because of the number of leaves on the tree. So it is easier to push them over in strong winds. They are far more susceptible to be blown over and cause disruptions in September than when they haven't got any leaves on them at all in February, for example.
Okay, so that's Northern Ireland, tomorrow morning especially, so there could be some disruption before people wake up. Check before you travel tomorrow morning is probably the advice, and always keep up to date with the very latest warnings through the Met Office, either through social media or, of course, on our website. Now, let's move on, because once the strongest winds, as the storm heads further north, actually then the strongest winds will potentially transfer through the morning to parts of central, southern Scotland and the far northwest of England. So in this amber area here, again, what kind of winds are we looking at?
Well, again, it's a very similar story. Broadly speaking, 65 to 75 miles an hour. There is a chance we could see a little bit more than that, particularly in some exposed parts of the central lowlands of Scotland, and there is a chance that we could get winds gusting to 80 miles an hour, which might not sound like a lot of difference, but that little extra 5 miles an hour can make a significant difference in terms of the amount of disruption that's possible.
And again, just to reiterate the potential that we're likely to see, power cuts are possible, trees coming down. It only takes one tree to fall on a rail line to disrupt services. I mean, ferries almost certainly going to be disrupted in this zone. So again, check before you travel tomorrow morning. The impact slightly later on in the morning across central and southern parts of Scotland, but we are looking at these kind of issues. Again, damage to buildings. It's an amber warning. It's not a yellow amber warning. It's an amber warning. There could be flying debris, that kind of thing. So stay up to date with the very latest. That's fantastic, Will. Thank you very much. That's the very latest on Storm Ali. Then clears out of the way, but we're potentially seeing more wet and windy, wild weather. Have more on that in just a moment. But I think first of all, as we're still chatting here, and you were part of the Met Office and why you actually get to name storms, I guess. I mean, you don't get to choose the names. We'll get more on that in a minute. But you are one of the people, the chief meteorologist, in conjunction with Met Éireann, who gets to decide on these named storms. Talk us through the process about how you go about deciding.
That's right. What we discovered when we started doing this about 4 years ago, that naming storms is really important. And what it's all about is the warnings. It's supporting that message, getting that message across through the media, through social media, about weather that can affect people. So we want to get that message across as well as possible, and naming's a really good way of doing it. So the way that we do that is that it is all about the warnings. So I can talk you through the warning process that we went through this morning, and in fact in recent days, and then that leads to a naming discussion. with Met Éireann. Each Met service gets to have a chance to name the storms. In this case, it was a joint decision because actually it affects both nations equally. So that decision was taken this morning. But it is about the warnings. So a couple of days ago, we were looking at all this disturbed weather in the Atlantic. We had Storm Helene approaching. In the end, it wasn't as bad as it could have been, but it could have been. And so we had a very close eye on that. And we started to pick up this possible secondary low zipping across the Atlantic for Wednesday. So we were already discussing this with Met Éireann, already looking at all of our computer models, already monitoring all of the observations, and that comes into a discussion about a warning. Now, the way that our warnings work is that it's really not just about what the weather will be, it's about what the weather will do.
Right.
So it's the impacts
that
are really, really important. So what we first of all try and do is work out exactly where these low pressure systems are going. How strong will the winds be? But then we take it a stage further and say, well, what impact is that going to have? What level of disruption? Is it going to come at a certain time of day, rush hour, for example? Is it going to come at a certain time of year, when trees are in full leaf, for example? There's all these extra factors. In the summer, we might be looking at where the festivals are for outdoor activities. So all of these extra factors get considered, and then we add all of that up and think, what's the total level of disruption that is possible during this event? And that naturally leads to a warning. And we decide to go yellow, amber, or red on occasion. And this morning, we had enough of that confidence to go amber. And then when we're starting to talk about ambers and reds, then we're also talking about naming storms. It's not automatic. We're thinking, is this a useful thing to do? Is it going to add to the story rather than confuse the story? And in this case, it was clear cut. And we rang Met Éireann, our colleagues in Dublin, and they were in full agreement with us, and it was a unanimous decision that this would be the first named storm properly of the season.
That's fantastic. Fascinating insight there into how a storm actually gets named here at the Met Office. You don't get to choose the names, though, do you, Will? Because as we discussed last week on this show with Bonnie, the names were sent in back in 2015. We put a call out for names. We're still going through those names. It may change in the future, but the names are set for this year, and you can visit the Met Office website to see that list. I'll just see if we've had any questions in, actually, because you may be able to answer some of these, Will, while we're here. What have we got on here? Hayley asks, I'm in Newcastle. Will my kids be going to school tomorrow? Gives me anxiety. So, Hayley, I mean, that's a judgment call again about the impact, isn't it? I mean, Newcastle's in the yellow area.
It's in the yellow warning area, which means that there's potential for, well, strong winds, 50 to 60 miles an hour. So there is some potential for disruption.
And again, you just get, one tree down could really disrupt things in that area. So it's an impact call. It's in a yellow warning currently. Stay tuned, Hayley, for further updates on that. Make sure you keep across the warnings, that kind of thing. And RWTWM, it's a tricky one for me to get the name right. Thanks for your question, though. What is it, and this is a really good question, what is it about the interaction with the jet stream that causes the deepening? Again, some high-level meteorology.
Oh, right, okay. Well,
we've only got 5 minutes.
Yeah. But you'll know this one, Alex, because we learnt this when we were on our training course together.
It was 5 years ago, wasn't it?
A little bit longer than that. It's a little bit like poo sticks.
Right, yes.
So many of us will have played that, throwing a stick off a stream and seeing how it runs along the stream. Now, you'll notice that the faster bit of the stream is in the middle, and towards the edge, it's slower. And if the stick moves into that, then it starts to spin. And it's a similar thing with the jet stream. It's not quite the same, but this is a good way of describing it. So if it drifts across to the side of the jet stream, particularly that colder side, then it starts to spin things up more and more, just like that twig is spinning around more and more. So that's a good way of thinking about it. That's the way that I think about it when I'm up there making the decision.
So when you're making these big calls, you're thinking of Winnie the Pooh and Piglet and that kind of thing. That's another great explanation. Thanks, Will. OK, let's move on to the forecast, because it's going to be a lively week. We've already had a busy few days here at the Met Office, and things are only going to get probably a little bit busy in the next 24 hours. There's Ali, and if we run through the sequence, we can see that Ali, well, we're gone by this time. Well, it will be gone by this time tomorrow, but certainly tomorrow afternoon it clears away. And then eyes focus down here. There's another little area of low pressure developing. Yeah,
so this is another, not quite the same system. It's a much flatter system, as we call it. So it's
so flatter, just so the isobars are more spaced out, whereas that's much more circular. This is a much, you talk about flatter with the
That's right. So we're thinking that the main impact of this is just along these frontal systems here, just some areas of heavy rain, in particularly running up into parts of Wales and northwest England. So we do have a yellow warning out for heavy rain. This is not looking like it's going to drift across the jet stream and develop in the same way that Ali is. However, it does start to develop as it leaves the UK, so the winds get stronger and stronger throughout the day.
So the isobares are already a bit closer together across the UK, although that wouldn't be damaging winds. However, as it intensifies here, as it moves across, then it really, a bit like Ali did as it moved towards the UK, doing something similar, and again, that's to do with the jet stream.
Exactly. It's similar, but doing it all a bit further east. So we do have to keep an eye on how it develops as it leaves the UK later on Thursday.
So this
but
is
at the moment, it's looking
Friday, parts of Scandinavia.
So it's going to give some really strong winds there. But for most of us here in the UK, it'll be mainly about the rain.
So that's one system Thursday clearing away. Then we've got, what's this? Little high pressure promising perhaps some calmer weather across the UK Friday, maybe into
I'm not going to
Saturday?
promise it, Alex, but it's looking pretty promising for a ridge of high pressure to give at least a good start to the weekend.
And then, what's this? Another area of low pressure coming in.
So this is all a lot more uncertain. This is where the computer models that we use, they can come up with very different forecasts for the end of the weekend, and so this may well change.
Yes.
But at the moment, the indications are that there will be some more wet and potentially windy weather coming in on Sunday.
Battle of that ridge of high pressure and that low pressure system, but it could be. It's all to play for. It's a number of days away, and as we've seen, we've got at least 1-2 rapidly developing systems to get through first. But the weather certainly looks very changeable for the foreseeable future. Will, that was brilliant. Thank you very much for that. It's really, really insightful stuff. I'll just see if we've had any further questions in. But the message at the moment is stay tuned to the forecast, basically. Oh, here we go. Apple asks, do you expect Sunday to be a named storm? Just too early to say.
It is too early to say. It is possible, but it is really too early to say. There's an awful lot of uncertainty. And so watch this space, again, is the message.
OK, but the main concern at the moment is with Storm Ali affecting the UK tonight and tomorrow morning. Will, thank you very much for joining us. It's been fantastic. And thank you for watching. Thank you for all your questions, sending them in. Keep them coming. And the most important message, as Will has just said as well, stay up to date with the latest weather forecasts and the latest weather warnings. We're constantly looking at it. It is our job, and we're constantly monitoring and updating things as well. Stay weather aware and stay safe, especially through the course of Wednesday across northern Britain. But thank you very much for watching.